Hi, and welcome to another episode of REDtalks.live. I am your host, Nathan Pierce from F5 Networks, and I have a guest from AspenMesh. Andrew, want to introduce yourself and what you do there?
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew Jenkins. I'm a senior architect on AspenMesh, which is an F5 innovation to sort of work on service mesh, which is a new communication thing for the way containers talk to each other in environments like Kubernetes.
Awesome, and specifically enterprise-grade solutions in this kind of service mesh. Is that the focus, if I get that right?
Yeah, that's a big part of AspenMesh is taking the sort of open source service mesh technology that's out there and making a version that is operable for enterprises. So things like support, enterprise, add-in features, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Now, I do a lot of spying on people. That's kind of one of my fun things I do. And one of those is reading blogs that come out of organizations about cool solutions. And I saw one that came from yourself and thought, this is cool. Let's share this with more people. So we got Andrew on today to talk a bit about this. So, Andrew, what's the elevator pitch of what it is that you've done?
Yeah, so part of our deal here is to have a supported AspenMesh service mesh that's got Istio inside, and so that means that we need to be able to build our AspenMesh release with potentially some bug fixes and do our own test and qualification around AspenMesh. And so we needed some test infrastructure to do this. Our AspenMesh is built on top of Istio. It already has some test infrastructure, but it wasn't a great fit for us. And so we looked at a way to make this a little bit more lightweight and easy for us to test in our setup. And when we got finished, we figured that, hey, other people out there might be looking at similar challenges, and we might as well just say, how we did it in case it helps them get started. So the end result is Kubernetes in a container so that you can just Docker run and have a tiny little ephemeral Kubernetes install that you can play with and then throw away when you're done.
So this is getting a bit, so I'm thinking of the movie Inception, when they go inside and then they go inside again. It's kind of like that, right? 6 levels deep type thing. So you put a container management system in a container to give yourself a very agile, easy to create test framework. So that's kind of important. If you're developing a solution for a microservice architecture, you should kind of be able to support your own development in an environment like that as well. I mean, why would you bring like waterfall to
right
Kubernetes? Or yeah, so you're very much behaving in the way that the environment it's intended to go to.
Yep, that's it exactly. There's other development approaches that lots of people use, and this is kind of a follow-on to those. So like the most common place, and the place from which it sort of starts, is a project called MiniKube that by default gives you a tiny little Kubernetes cluster in a virtual machine on your laptop. And so that's great, but the problem that we faced is in our build infrastructure, we couldn't make new virtual machines because we're running in somebody else's cloud. So we didn't have access to nested virtualization, but we did want all that, sort of microservices kind of thing. We want to actually be able to test it in a Kubernetes cluster. So we said, hey, maybe we can just, Docker supports nesting now. You can do Docker inside of Docker. Maybe you can set up a whole Kubernetes cluster inside of this. And we found, so MiniKube has a local kube mode that should work with Docker and Docker. And it looks like that sort of drifted relative to the current set of features in MiniKube. So we did a little bit of dusting off of that and then sort of built our own test infrastructure around it. And that's basically what we sort of just wrote down in our blog post of how we did all that.
So this is fascinating. So how much resources did it take to get this running? I mean, could I theoretically run this on my laptop for the traveling kind of worker that I am?
Yeah, definitely. That's we do that sometimes in our development environments. It depends on how permanent or ephemeral you want to be. But yeah, I can even do a little demo at the end. I just do Docker run, and you've got a Kubernetes cluster up and going.
Really cool. I mean, that's how I do a lot of work these days anyway, but often I'm running my container environment locally, but that's connecting off to an AWS environment over a VPN because I just can't run everything. Like, this is the problem. I mean, you develop in these microservice architectures, but you need to run on another architecture.
Yep.
Yeah, like it's a problem. It's actually a real world problem here.
Yep. And this is probably not suitable for running, actual big real workloads. There you want the dedicated cluster and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, if you just want to spin something up and see if the API is right, or this is actually used for us in what's kind of like a smoke test phase. Like, hey, you just built it. Let's put all the pieces together, turn them on, see if they let the smoke out or if they run okay. And so for that, it's great because as soon as you're done, you just throw it away, tear it down, and all gone.
That's cool. And actually, the example you just gave, API testing, I mean, that's literally what I'm needing these environments for all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Doing integration work, API to API kind of communication. I can't run everything up I need when I'm trying to build a system kind of proof of concept where there's many different parts working. Like the build up and tear down for each use case, that's a week at a time. Like if I can run this on top of my already kind of broken up virtualized environment, then that's great. That saves a lot of time.
Yep. That's the idea.
Cool. Well, you just said live demo. Which is very brave of you. Sacrificed like a bucket of chicken or something.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I tried it out before. It should be great. And the good news is, if you do it right, I think anybody can just sort of do these same steps, and they'll get a tiny little Kubernetes cluster.
Well, this is fantastic. Please do show us, and
sure.
I'm definitely going to be copying and taking notes for my own use as well.
Let's see. I'll go ahead and share this. So we'll go over here. You're seeing my screen right now, right? Yes. Over here on the left, this is going to be where we do the Docker run of the MiniKube Kubernetes container. And so this is going to start up, pull down a MiniKube, run another Docker inside of itself, and then just sit there, be ready to be a Kubernetes cluster. And then over here, we're going to go into that Kubernetes cluster. And then this guy in the bottom here, this is my actual outside laptop, just so you can see that the things in the Kubernetes cluster don't show up. They're inside the nested Docker. They don't affect any of the outer Docker, which is kind of the cool thing. That way we don't have to worry about namespacing or collisions or any of that sort of stuff. So start with here. This guy, my outer Docker machine, isn't currently running anything. Over here, I'll do this. This is the command line straight from the blog post. This is Docker run of the MiniKube DIND image that we published. It runs in -- privileged mode, so that's required to give the inner Docker the rights to create its own new namespaces so that it can do containerization. That's sort of the trick that's required so that you can do Docker in Docker.
That there is a useful enough tip from this episode. I did not know about that one. That's really handy.
So what it's doing right now is it started up and it's just running MiniKube VM local. And so MiniKube is this thing that will make a VM that has your Kubernetes cluster in it. And if you say the VM driver is actually local, it says, don't worry about virtual machines, just do it right here where you are. So if I ran this on my outer computer, it would start trying to run the Kubernetes API server and stuff in my Mac, and that would be a mess if something went wrong and I had to clean it all up. But in this case, it's actually running inside of the Docker container, so it'll do all that stuff, set up all the Kubernetes stuff, but when I'm done and I throw away the Docker container and exit, all gone. So it's downloading MiniKube, and here it goes. So it's starting up Kubernetes, and it's got a warning that, hey, you should so the none driver on personal workstation is exactly what I'm talking about. You want to run it inside of something else, like we've done here. So now I've got that guy up. So if I go over here, that I do now have a container, and Docker named it Amazing Bends for me. So over here, I can just go ahead and do Docker exec. Get a TTY in Amazing Bends, bin bash. So now I'm inside that first level Docker container, and I can do Docker PS, and I can see that what it's doing is it's bringing up a bunch of the Kubernetes infrastructure right now, and you can kind of see it going on over here on the left. So we can watch Kubernetes start, and And it may not be all the way up yet. Oh, there it goes. Cool. So it thinks that I've got a Kubernetes node here, and it's up and alive. And so if I run Docker PS, there's a bunch of Kubernetes stuff that's now running inside of this container. If we go over here, I do Docker PS. From my outer Mac system, there's only one container running, this amazing Benz thing. And my Mac doesn't know anything about what's running inside. It's got a whole Kubernetes cluster, but that's not really visible. It's just this one running container. Then up here, I don't think I'm going to get, yeah, I'm not going to get my scroll buffer, but if I go over, we'll see if this is really a full up Kubernetes cluster. I can go ahead and run this guy. This is an example Kubernetes command that's going to create one debug application running in my Kubernetes cluster. And so I talked to the API server. I asked it to go ahead and make it and run. So I kubectl get pods. I can see that it's creating this guy in my inner container. And so right now, this whole Kubernetes cluster is doing the Kubernetes thing, downloading that container, starting it up. And again, from outside the Mac, there's still just the one whole Kubernetes cluster in a container. That's it. So now I've got this guy. We can go inside of him. And this is pretty inception-y. So I'm inside of a Docker container right here. And I'm going to run a kubectl command that's going to say, hey, could you please give me a shell inside of the inner Docker container named shell demo? And here I am. And so I can, I don't know, just look around, be inside of another application inside this Kubernetes cluster. And then finally, when I'm done, back out here on my Mac, there's still just that one guy. I can just go ahead and Control-C on that guy. And since I was running it with RMIT, should be the case that when I go and look at Docker containers, that is all gone. Done. Kubernetes cluster up, running, and down like that. And you can do it again whenever you need a Kubernetes cluster just in a Docker container.
This is great. I was just thinking of another example, actually, a use case. If I want to create an environment and actually share that with someone, and I'm actually integrating like with Kubernetes, I'm not just running some code on top. How do I get my whole environment to someone else? This is an excellent way of doing that. They just needed to have Docker. Like that was locally, and then I can hand that over and they're running the same thing. That's really cool. And portability. How do I get what I did from here running exactly the same somewhere else? Just install Docker on one of my AWS images and throw the same thing out there.
Yep.
Nice. Thank you for the demonstration. Actually, the blog was on AspenMesh.io. It's probably the latest blog that's on there for those who want to go look at it. But yeah, thanks for sharing. I'm totally going to go and just copy that right now. So really appreciate your time, Andrew, and hopefully we'll hear more cool things from you in the future.
Yeah, cool. And we'd love to hear feedback. We think that this is a neat little thing. We're probably going to look at trying to get it back upstream to like the sort of MiniKube environment if this is the kind of thing that they want. But we just figured we'd write down, how easy it is to get this up and going and how you can use it in your test infrastructure is what we're using it for mostly. But yeah, it was great talking to you, Nathan. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, Andrew. Really appreciate it. And this is what we need from companies out there innovating to share more with the world and actually help everyone work a little better and a little smarter.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming. You've been listening to Andrew Jenkins from AspenMesh. Mash that together a little bit. AspenMesh. And Nathan Pierce from F5 Networks. Thanks for listening.
All right. See ya.